Good afternoon, and thank you very much for being here this afternoon. I know that you are all very, very busy following the development related to the humanitarian pause, so I really appreciate you coming now. I wanted to share with you what I saw in Gaza during my second visit, and let me start by saying that compared to what I saw 2 weeks ago and what I saw now, the situation has become much, much worse for the people there. So basically, streets I saw, I went to Rafah and to Khan Yunis, basically. Some of the streets were almost completely empty. It was airy. Solid waste is piling up everywhere. Most of the shops and pharmacies were closed. A few vendors set up some vegetable stalls, but you have very large queue in front of bakeries. Wherever we drove during the day, there were also children. Children are absolutely everywhere. Here, deafening bombardment was constant during the 24 hours I was there. At certain point, whole building shook, and this was particularly the case when I met our staff in Khan Yunis at the health center. And this is the daily reality of life in Gaza, whether in the north, in the middle, or in the south of the Strip. The constant fear and anxiety for over 2 million people in the Strip, whether we talk about children, women, or older people. People, in fact, and I experience it without being there with my family, but are going to sleep holding their children tight while not knowing if they will wake up alive the following morning. We meet also today at a very somber milestone, as UNRWA records more than 1 million people now sheltering in our facilities across the Gaza Strip. This is more than half of the total number of people displaced. They live in over 150 UNRWA schools and buildings. Gaza is certainly one of the very few places in the world where the United Nations opens its premises to host people forced to leave their homes. It is, I believe, still a sign of trust of the local community in the UN flag and UNRWA, but it is also a huge responsibility, especially given the fact that we are not able to provide the basic of the basic for the displaced people to survive with dignity in our shelter. This week I visited one of these biggest shelters, the Khan Yunis vocational training. Before, this center was a place of pride and joy for UNRWA because it was a vocational training center for young people to join the job market. Now it is home to 35,000 people living in frightful conditions. I have to say, the place looks like an overcrowded prison with substandard living conditions, with very few toilets and the sewage water on the road. But the most painful is the shock, trauma, and sadness in the eyes of the people. They told their story of how they have been forced to flee their homes, some as recently as last week, leaving their entire life behind them. Number one, they left under the bomb. They left everything behind. They lost loved one, they lost their home and escaped by sheer miracle. But all were stripped of the dignity overnight. This is how they feel. This is what they told me. I met a father who burst into tears as he told me how he was forced to run for his life and try to save his family. But he also burst into tears because of what he has to experience today. He is now living in a barely 4 square meters makeshift space in the UNRWA shelter. It's just covered by plastic sheeting. He lives there with his wife, and he lives there with 5 children. He and his family sleep on the floor, no mattress, no blankets, and they even use their shoes as a pillow. He is one of 1.7 million people, like other displaced people. In fact, I keep constantly also hearing the story that people haven't changed their clothes for 45 days. They are still living in the same clothes. They are fighting to get the 1 meal a day. It takes hours to wait and to use the couple of toilets available for hundreds of people in this shelter. And winter is very fast approaching, and it's getting colder in Gaza. In fact, it was very cold in Gaza when I was there during the last 24 hours. Skin disease and diarrhea have exponentially increased as a result of unsanitary conditions made much worse by the rain. In some places, the rate of disease are 45 times more than it was in previous year. Like I said before, it's only a matter of time before people in Gaza start dying due to the siege and the lack of basic, not just because of the bombardment. During the night, I spent in Rafah all I could think about were the children, were the older people and parents I met. How it feels to be awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of an airstrike, bombardment, by the screams and shouts of your neighbors. As we were heading out of Gaza, I started to get news of yet another UNRWA school in Jabalia, in the north of the Strip, that was hit. It was struck for the second time, and here I would like to stress again that since the war began, 69 UNRWA shelters were hit, some more than once, some directly. Half of them are in the north, but they were also in the southern part and the middle part. Most of these shelters were sheltering thousands of people, and up to now we have 190 people who so far have been reported killed in UN premises. So basically, 190. So even the UN flag can no longer provide protection for the people in Gaza. And I believe, and I repeat here, it is a blatant disregard to rules of war, including international humanitarian law. I confirm once again that UNRWA shares the coordinates of all its facilities across the Gaza Strip with all parties to the conflict. And I follow with great concern reports of unauthorized entry and military use of our facilities, mainly in the north. Which also takes me to the floating idea now and proposal that we keep hearing and pops up of so-called safe zone or humanitarian zone. I would like here to reiterate the humanitarian community position again. There is no such a safe zone when it is declared unilaterally in a war zone. Safe zones, anyway, do not absolve the responsibility to abide to international humanitarian law's rules, especially when civilians seek protection and shelter in UN schools and hospitals. They just cannot be a military target and should continue to provide safety. Now, before I close with a remark, let me say a few words on our response and humanitarian work. Since the war began, UNRWA has remained in Gaza to deliver much needed humanitarian assistance. We are committed to stay, and we are committed to scale up our operation. I was heartened to pay tribute to UNRWA staff in Gaza, whom I respect and take inspiration from. They are sharing the same living condition, fear and mourning as everyone else in the Gaza Strip. Yet, despite that, they go to work every day and make the impossible possible with very few resources in an increasingly darkening environment. But here, you know, our staff are like you and I. They're human. I asked a colleague how he copes and keeps his composed attitude. His answer was, I don't. Every day, I find a place in a corner where I can cry. This is the only way I can keep going. I feel so powerless and helpless in front of my children, in front of the community. Finally, as we all anticipate the beginning of the much-awaited pause, it started, in fact, this morning, I reiterate my call that this pause becomes a long-standing humanitarian ceasefire. People need respite. They deserve calm. They deserve to sleep at night without being anxious whether they will make it through. The pause is also an opportunity to reach people in need, including in the north, and start repairing civilian infrastructure. UNRWA calls for the expansion of the humanitarian operation to respond once for all to the scale and volume of the overwhelming humanitarian needs. And we are really, really far from that. As far as UNRWA is committed, we are committed to continue bringing assistance to people in need. We stand ready to receive at least 200 trucks of aid, including fuel, per day. But at the same time, I call for the reopening of commercial supply line to get the private sector back on its feet and replenish the empty market. For this, we need the reopening of Kerem Shalom. And in closing, I repeat what I have said at many occasions. The longer, the obvious, in fact, the longer this war goes on, the deeper the polarization, the deeper the anger, the deeper the frustration, and the further we are from a prospect of a political solution. So thank you.